I'm Craig Kenneth, a relationship coach and a psychotherapist. Every relationship is different and every breakup is different. Work with me and you'll get professional help on your situation. And if you're in no contact, focused on personal growth, my workbook series, The Knowledge, will help you make changes like you've never made before. Available now at AskCraig.net. Hi there, I'm Coach Craig Kenneth.
And I'm Coach Victoria.
And today we're going to be talking about, will he come back if I was selfish? You know, after a breakup, a lot of people really look at everything they've done and that they perceive to be wrong, and they beat themselves up about it. And one of those things that we see is that people are selfish, right? They realize, looking back, I was trying to force things my way. I didn't really think about their needs, and that they had acted selfishly during a relationship. So we're going to talk about this today. We got an email coaching that somebody's wondering, was it their selfish behavior that pushed their partner away? And if they were selfish, why would they come back, or would they come back? What do you think about that?
I do think that many people have the tendency to blame themselves whenever anything goes wrong. I think this stems from early childhood, because when kids are in situations where they are being abused or mistreated, they're helpless and hopeless. And so they tend to blame themselves as the answer, because blaming a caregiver might threaten their safety.
Yes.
And so this type of a schema or message can continue into life and can continue into your relationships. Many people do enter relationships with this intense fear of hurting their partner, of making somebody else feel bad, and so they tend to blame themselves. So I think this is a completely valid question, and I'm curious to see what she has to say.
Yeah, it's hard because you want to balance, like, it's not easy to balance, like, what is it? Like, was I selfish, or was I being reasonable? And I think a lot of women in particular beat themselves up and feel like that they were selfish, or that it was their fault in that department.
Right.
So let's get into this email coaching. This is from a woman in her mid-30s, and she was dating a guy in his late 30s. Now, they met through a mutual friend. Let's call him Hank. Okay? Hank comes from a broken family. His mom divorced his dad on a whim to be in a relationship with a serial cheater whose oldest son sexually abused him and his sister. So look at the trauma right there. Mom leaves dad to be with this guy, and then that guy's son abuses him. Horrible, horrible. That's just awful. Massive amounts of trauma right there.
Right. And it does bring to light that men do get sexually abused.
Yes, it's very common. And I've had many guys tell me that over the years, that it's happened to them. And so we know there's a stigma with that, but just understand it happens a lot more than you would realize.
And he was able to trust her with that information.
Yeah. And that's a good sign, right? When we were introduced, Hank had been single for approximately 6 months. According to him, his ex-fiancée broke up their 6-year relationship unexpectedly and kicked him out of the house without any explanation. Now that sounds a little fishy to me.
Yeah, I would agree.
You know, a lot of times people will tell you, oh, this is the reason they broke up with their last partner, but they often sugarcoat it and don't really admit what they did wrong. Because they don't want to ruin their chances of turning you off and ruining things with you, right?
Or they end up blaming the other partner for everything that went wrong. Of course, in certain cases, if there's cheating, abuse, it could come off that way, but I think sometimes a more mature way of describing past relationships is to say, okay, these were the dynamics. These were things that both of us did that contributed to the breakup.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let me go on. He later told me that she had been on antidepressants for over 3 years, and that they never had a fight throughout their whole relationship because there was no communication. Well, that doesn't sound good, right? So that relationship did not sound healthy.
Right.
That worried me at first. I was afraid he might not be ready for a new relationship. But he told me that he had been in therapy after his breakup and that he moved on. Well, people always tell you, oh yeah, things are hunky-dory. Hank is happy. No problems here. But I'm sure there was a lot more still going on there.
Right.
Hank showed many signs of a healthy partner, so I decided to go for it. He insisted that communication was his number one priority due to the lack of it in his last relationship. Well, I'd wonder if he'd had the skills if he wasn't able to do it.
What I was curious about too.
Yeah. Right? If he was with this person for 3 years and he's not used to communicating, it's going to feel very foreign to him.
Right. And he might be at the point where maybe he recognizes communication being a fault, but still doesn't know how to implement.
Yeah, exactly. We had been dating for 3 months when he asked me to be his girlfriend. We were in a committed relationship for 4 months when he broke up with me over text messages after our first fight. So, now, does that come across that they had been together for 7 months around that time? Because it says 3 months before and then 4 months committed. So it sounds like they were together for 7 months total.
Right, that's what I interpreted.
And then he breaks up with her over a text message because of one fight.
Right.
All right, let's see what happened here. What do you guys think it was? Why do you think they broke up? Prior to that event, our relationship was very loving and fulfilling. The fight happened when I asked him if he could reschedule a game night with his friends 2 days in advance to be able to attend my brother-in-law's birthday dinner happening on the same evening. Okay, this is important. This is the big reason for the fight, right? So she asks him, please reschedule your game night because my brother-in-law's got a birthday party. Birthday party for a family member seems something important that you'd want to be at, right? Okay, then let me go on because this is important. My family is very close-knit and we celebrate each other's birthdays together. Hank didn't want to, even though they have game nights every 2 weeks. So now it's not looking so good for Hank at this point.
Right.
Right? Like, okay, you see these people every 2 weeks and you don't want to reschedule it to go to a family birthday party? It doesn't look good. It looks pretty selfish to me. Ironically, she was the one that was feeling selfish. Not sounding so far like that, huh? But what does she think? Maybe it was selfish of me, but I felt like a family birthday dinner was more important, and I expressed that to him. I have to say I agree.
And you can ask for whatever you want in relationships.
Yep.
Your answer might not always be yes, but you can ask. And it sounded like she started that communication about what she wanted. I think that was completely fair. And it sounded like she was trying to have some sort of a negotiation with him. So you would think that this would be a really good moment to connect and to learn more about each other. Okay, why are these game nights so important to you?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Why is this birthday party so important to you? Let's talk about that. But it sounds like they weren't able to do that without it escalating into a fight.
Yeah, and it got pretty bad, okay? She says the whole argument lasted 3 days through text messages because he wouldn't answer my messages even if he had read them. So now he's like stonewalling her.
Right, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. On the 3rd day, I wrote to him that I was feeling unimportant and I didn't know if I could trust him to be there for me. The lack of communication had me feeling completely disconnected. That sounds pretty reasonable to me too.
And all of that is valid. Imagine a situation where you live together. What would he do? Lock himself in the room and not respond? Stonewalling can be a form of abuse. And not saying that it is in this situation. It sounds like maybe he was overwhelmed. Maybe this being the first fight, you know, a bunch of fears came up in him. Maybe he was triggered from his past relationship or earlier wounds. We don't know. But it does make me think, what would happen if this relationship was played forward?
Yeah. Let me go on. He almost broke up with me through text right there, but we agreed to meet in person and talk through it. We had a very loving and understanding conversation. We were able to compromise and find solutions to make sure the issue wouldn't come up again in the future. All right, so that sounds fairly reasonable, right? So what happens? Basically, it involved sharing our schedule with each other and talking face to face instead of sending texts. I was ready to move past the argument. The following week was good. Everything seemed to be back to normal. We spent the weekend together, but on Tuesday I could sense that something wasn't right. He was more distant. I asked him about it. We talked on the phone, and then he told me he still felt weird from our fight. Okay. He said he had a pattern of running away from uncomfortable situations. He had done it several times in his career, quitting a good job suddenly and then regretting it after a while. Well, it sounds like he might quit this and regret it after a while too.
That's true. I give him a lot of credit for being able to recognize that. Many people live their life blindly without able to spot these patterns that ultimately do them and others harm. So I'm glad that he was able to plainly say it.
Yeah. That is a good sign. But he hasn't been able to stop it from happening.
Right,
he's able to see it. He's not able to stop it. He felt like he couldn't move past our argument. He added that our family values were too different and that he would hurt me again in the future. He also said that for the longest time he was in a relationship where things he did wrong were not brought up to him and that it was hard for him to be treated differently. Are you smelling the BS?
It's very strange. I can understand the family values differences. It sounded like they had very different growing up environments. You know, I wonder if he does value friends over family simply because of the fact that a lot of hurt and pain came from family to him.
Sure.
And so chosen family took precedence over that.
That's a great point. Okay, so when I read this, I interpret it as in his past relationship, if he did something wrong, the other girlfriend didn't bring it up to him. So now he's in a situation where things he does wrong are brought up to him and he doesn't like it. He doesn't like having to be like accountable for his behavior.
That's interesting because the way I read it was that in the past, maybe his ex didn't bring up some of the things that bothered her and so treated him differently by being passive aggressive to him. And maybe there was a sense of that.
Yep.
That maybe she wasn't being as direct or maybe she was being too direct. Something here was not what was familiar to him.
So she would get angry at him and then instead of saying it to him, she would just stonewall him or be mean to him. Yeah, sure, that's a possibility too. Either way, it doesn't sound like he's very comfortable in how they're communicating, right?
And he's saying up front that he is bringing a lot of baggage from the past, and that to me is a sign that he's not yet processed the past breakup, and I'm not sure what he has worked on in therapy, but I really hope that he continues that work.
Yeah, because he's got a lot of trauma here. Okay, 2 days later, he dumped me on Messenger. Not very nice. He didn't even want to meet up to get his things back. So it's like, this guy's completely shut down.
Yeah.
I tried to have a conversation to help him calm down, but I could tell that he was gone. He kept repeating that the problem would happen again in the future because my family was important to me and that it was best to end things now. So it's really interesting that this guy sees that she has needs, like a need to be close to her family, and her family relationships are important to her, and that's a deal breaker for him.
I wonder how triggering it is for him. Because I wonder him being around a large group of family. I'm imagining him, especially when you have sexual abuse that happens in the family, if it's not discussed, if your family doesn't protect you in that situation to keep you separated from perpetrators, what ends up happening often is that you're over and over and over again re-exposed to the very person who abused you. And so I'm wondering if her request to do this, family gathering for her brother-in-law's birthday, if on some level brought up all of these feelings of family is unsafe.
Yep.
I'm going to be very uncomfortable in this setting.
Entirely possible. But because he doesn't communicate.
Right. Right.
It would be hard to know any of that.
Exactly. And it's a lot of speculation just based off the little information I know.
Yeah.
But it sounds like he is outright saying a lot of his issues, which maybe is an improvement. Maybe it is an improvement through therapy, but definitely is not the end of his work. And I'm not sure if he's at that place where he's prepared to be in a relationship with somebody.
No, it doesn't sound like it, because this is a very basic thing she's asking for, and a very basic need for her to live her life.
Right.
And if he can't handle that, I think that's unreasonable.
Right.
Let's go on. He got along really well with my family, so it wasn't the issue. Well, there may have been more to it than that. Just like your point you just made. I only wanted him to attend family birthday dinners like 6 times a year. That sounds pretty reasonable. But he acted as though I didn't want him to go out with his friends anymore. He mentioned something about his freedom and his independence being threatened. He totally overreacted and exaggerated the whole issue. 3 days later, he changed his Facebook status to single and deleted every picture we had together.
Wow.
This is pretty rough.
Yeah. And when you do see an overreaction or something that's disproportionate to the event, it can point to it being a trigger or bringing up some type of traumatic event.
Yeah.
We've said in the past, if it's hysterical, it's historical.
Yep.
So his reaction to this does sound like it's a lot deeper than just surface level.
Yep. She says, I feel like a monster. I never complained about him going out with friends or going to concerts without me or anything, because it never bothered me. I actually enjoyed having that time apart from him. The only thing I was upset about was him not caring about something that was important to me. That's completely reasonable in my book. She asks, was I selfish and unreasonable? Okay, unreasonable doesn't sound like it at all. Selfish, maybe a little, but not in a bad way.
Right.
Right? Like, I think it's okay to be selfish about things. You have to be selfish about things. But to what extent and what degree, this sounds completely reasonable. And I think it's completely fair to ask your partner to go to a handful of birthday parties a year.
Exactly.
Right?
And it sounded like at this point that it was a need for you. It sounded like it would be difficult to imagine a relationship where you didn't have close connection with your family. It's something that you value. It's something that's important to you. And it's something that I believe that you should seek in a partnership. And so the fact that he wasn't able to meet you on that need really makes me question your compatibility.
Yeah. Yeah, because I don't think you're asking for anything unreasonable at all. In fact, I felt like his behavior was extremely unreasonable and rash and immature in a lot of ways too. Right.
And I also don't want you to miss the red flags that we're seeing here. And the red flags being his stonewalling, that he completely silenced you in the time where communication would have helped the most, even after he said that communication was a priority. Also the fact that he did say that he was afraid of hurting you again in the future. Also the fact that he is aware of the cycle where he does quit things. So don't ignore things that partners tell you, especially when they're warnings in disguise.
Yeah. She's got a couple questions that we'll go over. Do you think he's splitting? Okay, so it sounds like you might think he has either multiple personalities or that he's borderline.
Or dissociating in some way.
Yeah. And that's possible based on his trauma history. But we certainly don't have enough evidence to get into that.
Right.
We only have a little bit, so I wouldn't go down that road. But I certainly think it's a possibility based on the trauma history. Do you think he has an avoidant attachment style? It's hard to say. We know he has a serious trauma history. Could be borderline. And maybe he is disorganized. He could be avoidant. He could be fearful avoidant.
Right.
I don't think we have enough to quite... This one's complicated.
Yeah.
Right? This one isn't so cut and dry because of this history.
Right, and we're also hearing about a person through an email from one person's point of view, so it is really difficult to draw these conclusions, but what we can say is that there are a lot of traits that we're seeing that just generally do come from trauma histories.
Yeah.
Especially that avoidance and stonewalling.
Yeah.
I would even say that avoidance... Some people can dissociate in an effort to avoid. And so it's possible during those times where he wasn't talking with you that he was detached from that situation or actively distancing himself. And so to say, is it splitting? Is it dissociation? Point is that you weren't being heard and that you weren't being seen in that moment.
Yeah. And there's not enough information to get into that.
Right.
Because that's really complicated, deep stuff right there. Do you think he'll contact me again? I think so. He admitted he has a history of quitting jobs and regretting it. He's now quitting this job, the relationship job, and I think he's going to regret it because I think at some point after maybe he's calmed down, he's going to realize that she was being reasonable and that most people are going to have similar expectations from a partner. So I do think he's going to reach out. Not right away. He'll need at least 3 or 4 months, I think. But I do think she'll probably hear from him again.
Right. And I would also be curious as to what that means. Because it does sound here that you did have the tendency to blame yourself, to jump to, oh my gosh, I asked for too much. I overwhelmed him. And so I don't want your fear of abandonment to outweigh some of these red flags that we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. We got one last question from her. Do you think there's a possibility that he hadn't healed from his last relationship and maybe it played a role in our breakup? Absolutely. We don't know a lot about that relationship and how accurate or truthful it was, the information he gave. It's certainly possible that it was all accurate, but regardless, for me, this is about his trauma history.
Yeah, I agree. You can kind of look at it kind of like Jenga, if you've ever played Jenga. If you have an unsolid foundation, everything else that builds up on that just increases the instability.
That's right.
So,
and this is way at the bottom. This one's way at the bottom.
Exactly.
And we pulled out 2 at the same time, and somehow it's standing. Right?
And so all I'm saying is that every relationship on top of that just adds dimensions to that trauma. And so, yes, I do think that his past relationship did have a part to play on top of the foundation of that, all that trauma from childhood.
Yeah, it would be very hard to trust women after mom did what she did.
Yeah.
Left dad to be with a guy who left him vulnerable and his sister vulnerable to being abused. There would be a lot of hurt and a lot of anger there. And he's going to need to get some real therapy for that if he hasn't already. I still think he will, based on what I've read about his behavior here.
Right.
So, do we think you were selfish?
No.
No. Do we think that he'll return? Yes, probably. It's going to go a lot deeper than that. It's going to go into, will he be able to be a good partner for you?
Exactly.
Will he be able to meet your needs? Will he be able to handle what you're looking for in a relationship? Because to me, it seems like he's still in this very selfish place. I want to go play cards with my friends or whatever, gaming night. He didn't even want to budge maybe on a day, a couple days to switch to go to this dinner. It seems in that mode that some people can be in after a long-term relationship of being very selfish. Me, it's about me. I don't want to think about your needs or another person's needs. And I only want the basics out of this relationship. Hanging out with you, having fun, hooking up, and then I don't want anything on top of that. Any responsibilities, obligations, or any of those things.
Exactly.
But yet he made it seem like that's what he wanted in the beginning.
Yeah, I definitely think it's important to look at people's actions. He said he prioritized communication. Actionably, he shut you out. He silenced you. I don't think that's fair to you.
Yeah. So I'd be very, very careful with this guy. And I'd want to know how much work he's done in therapy to get through the trauma that he's had. I'm sorry he went through all that. That's horrible. But you also want to be with somebody who can be a good partner for you.
Exactly.
Okay. So hopefully this video has been helpful to you. Of course, if you want to get our help personally, you can get it on my website, askcraig.net. I do email coaching and I do Skype. And Victoria is also available.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you.
Just click on her name on the top of the website to sign up with her. But that's it for this video. I'm Coach Craig Kenneth.
And I'm Coach Victoria.
And we will talk with you soon.